Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the third session of the Virtual Salon. It is wonderful to have so many of you with us again. Today we are going to be talking about a topic that has come up a few times in our session so far, and it is the theme of education. And specifically, and very much in keeping with the fact that most of us, our children are at home, and we have in varying degrees been invited to play a much more active role in our children's education, we're going to be talking specifically about homeschool and home education. And my question to the panel, and these amazing ladies who have come on, and I'm going to give a shout out, inshallah. When you come on, please can you just introduce yourselves, tell us a little bit about yourselves. But my question to you all, so we can jump right into it, is do you think that home education or education in general can be an act of resistance, can be a form of resistance? Anyone can jump in, just put your hand up or unmute. What are your thoughts on that question? Yes, ma'am.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. I'm excited to be back here. My name is Imani Bashir. I'm originally from Maryland in the United States of America. I am an international journalist and writer, also an author, and I currently live in Mexico. I think, specifically speaking as a Black American, homeschooling is indeed an act of resistance, specifically based on socioeconomically and how it is that our public school education is set up and built in the United States. Our public school system, like today, we're celebrating Juneteenth, June 19th. For anyone who is unfamiliar, June 19th, 1865 was the day that enslaved people in Galveston, Texas, found out that they were indeed emancipated, not necessarily freed, but emancipated. However, the Emancipation Proclamation was signed 2.5 years prior to them finding out. So we celebrate Juneteenth this day, June 19th, 1865, today being the 155th year, as a representation of that emancipation. But we also have to remember all of the things that we were not allowed. One thing that we were not allowed was an education. We were not allowed to read. It was illegal for us as Black people, enslaved people, to read. And then that trickled down into our educational system. Our educational system is very poor in teaching us what it is that our real history is. It's very poor in teaching us cultural things. As somebody who's an expat, I've lived in 5 countries. My son was not born in the United States. He was born in Europe, and that was purposeful. And simply because we don't learn how to coexist with others. We don't learn practical things and practical tools in public school systems. And so I don't trust that as a Black parent that my son will learn more of his identity in a public school setting. And specifically as an expat, I would prefer my husband and I having the reins of what it is that we teach him, number one, Islamically, and number two, as far as himself and who he is and where it is that he comes from. I think that as someone who had the blessing of having a father teach me who it is that I was outside of being a Muslim, but how it is that I fit as a Muslim and as a Black person in American society, I think it would do me a disservice to then put my son in a school setting that would undo and unravel all of the things that generationally my father and his father tried to undo with us, although we were public school children.
To speak to that for a second before we pass the mic, because I think something that you mentioned and that I know has come up in previous sessions, Imani, is this idea of legacy and this idea of, you know, in your case, your grandparents fighting for something and fighting really tooth and nail. And in this case, it was their Islamic identity, and you personally feeling very responsible for that legacy and for continuing that legacy. Would you say that that's true? Is that how you feel?
Absolutely, absolutely. You know, when we think of our ancestry, we think of what it is that our foremothers and our forefathers had to endure in order for us to have what it is that we have. And so for me to have the privileges that I have to go and live outside of the United States of America, I have to remember all of the work that was done and put into everyone that came before me. So all of the work that my grandparents and their grandparents and their grandparents had to work to instill for those who attempted to try to keep their Islam, for those who, tried to fight to keep their names. My grandparents had to go to court in order to keep their names, Sakina and Yahya. They had to actually go to court to fight to keep their names as Black American people. And so with that ancestral history and that generational history, I absolutely cannot undo all the hard work and the labor that they did to ensure that we stayed connected and understanding who it is that we were.
I have a little something that I want to just push in there, but I'd like anyone else who wants to maybe jump off Imani's point to jump in first before I come with this. Anyone else who feels that what's your answer to the question? What do you think, Mariam?
Assalamu alaikum. I was going to say, I absolutely agree with Sister Imani said, especially when she touched on the education system. I'm based in the UK, so subhanAllah, even from a primary level, we were taught about World War I, World War II, the Great Fire of London, all those sort of topics, and with children are taught about the inventors and the pioneers. But I mean, looking at the curriculum as a whole, never are we taught any South Asian history, any sort of Black history. And, that Black British history and South Asian history is so important. It's essentially what made our country what it is today. But unfortunately, our children are not taught that. And I really feel that homeschooling can totally be an act of resilience against the standardized education system, but also, unfortunately, the systemic racism that a lot of our children do face. So to answer your question, absolutely. And I think also homeschooling can be an act of faith as well. I think that's sort of really important to put in there. And it's really about allowing our children to have a solid, firm foundation and sense of identity. So when they do go out into the world, they're sure of themselves. They've come from a home or, which essentially centers them. Me, myself, I'm from a South Asian background, but my husband is from an African background. So essentially I'm raising Black children. And I've had to unlearn and learn so much. And for me, even though my children are quite young, my eldest just turned 6, my youngest is only 3, but we've already incorporated within our own homeschool sort of African history, South Asian history. So they know about the amazing, kingdoms of Africa and the kings and the queens. We've already started that. So I really feel that it is definitely an act of resistance.
Yeah, no, totally. I hear that. And I want to actually, I'm going to just really, I want to pick up on that, because I know that as I've heard a lot of Black families, African diaspora families talking about the importance of teaching Black history, African history, or whatever it is to our children, because it's something that is very narrow in the curriculum. It's kind of all based around slavery. We talked about this last week. But do you, as a South Asian, feel that there is benefit and do you feel there's benefit in your children learning about their South Asian roots as well and South Asian history?
Absolutely. I mean, I was discussing last week about the British Empire, and unfortunately, we're still taught today in the UK education system, about the wonderful things about the British Empire. We're not taught about any of the atrocities and what it really is. So to really give our children a real world view, I guess, homeschooling really allows us to give our children a real world view of what history actually was, and not the sort of Eurocentric sort of whitewashed version of it.
100%. I've got some people in the chat saying, I've already told my eldest about the Queen taking the Kohinoor. Yeah, 100%. Who would like to jump in now? Rahma, Rachel, Bilqis, who's next?
Yeah, I can go in.
Okay. Yes.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. My name is Rahma. I'm a mother of 3. I'm a children's book author. And so in terms of homeschooling, for me, the thing is that my parents never felt comfortable with the public school system. However, they felt that they didn't have the knowledge enough to do the homeschooling because they were immigrants. They came to the country. They barely, knew the language. However, one of the things that they've done is that they would always supplement our education. So on the weekends, they would enroll us in Islamic schools, full-time Islamic schools. So essentially, we were in school 7 days a week. because on the weekends we would go to the Islamic school where we would learn, the curriculum in terms of reading the Quran and the history of in Islamic education, the hadith and everything like that. So for me, I grew up knowing that there's a lack obviously in these public schools, and the fact that they're not centered around me and my identity. And I faced a lot of racism as well. I faced a lot of prejudice from my teachers, and that's ongoing until I went to university and things like that. And when I had my eldest, she is now turning 8. I decided to actually hold her back a year and not to enroll her in school. Here, they start preschool as young as 4. And but it is now mandatory to put them in school into grade 1 until they turn 6. So that's, the government requires you to put them in school at the age of 6 for grade 1. So I held her back, and even just doing that little part, because I felt that she wasn't ready. That little part, I would get a lot of criticism, and a lot of the schools would ask me, where did you put her in preschool? So for me, that was my first try in homeschooling, and I honestly didn't do any homeschooling. We would just live our normal life. I found that even those 2 years that I held her back had tremendous benefit into her self-esteem, and the fact that she took more of herself and she was more confident when she went into the school. I had the ability to now put her in Islamic school, something that my parents couldn't afford to do. We were 7. There was no way that they could afford the tuition of 7 children in a private Islamic schools. It's very expensive. This is me taking the extra step that I thought my parents couldn't afford to do. But now I'm even seeing that that's not enough. That me putting her in a private school where she is a Muslim and everyone is of the same faith, which is something I really desperately wanted when I was a child, is not even enough, because she is a Muslim, but she's also a Black Muslim child. And then that aspect of it is also not addressed. The last few months now being home and seeing the things that she's learning, and actually me participating in that, I've actually seen that my child is not happy at school. The amount of work is way too much. The fact that some of the things that they're learning could easily be done in a few hours. My child is expressing things like, I don't like being in my room for 4 to 5 hours on my own. I don't like school. I wish I could spend more time with you guys, because, I have 3. She's the only one in school that is having to do all of this homework, and the other 2 are home with us. And it's just, I'm seeing that it's just, she's not even happy. She's not happy doing this. I see that there is actually not the benefit. Like, here I am trying to do extra things that my parents couldn't do. And each generation, that's what we do. We try to do more than our parents couldn't do. But here I am thinking, no, at this point, you know what? My child is not happy. She's not even learning the things that I need her to learn. Therefore, we've made the decision to homeschool full-time next year, because what was happening at this time was school at home. It was not homeschooling. So inshallah, I look forward to this opportunity to now have more control into what my child is going to be learning, have more of that influence, but also giving that freedom to my child to be happy. And one of my greatest goal is to give that sense of the love of learning into my child. And I feel that the school system actually robs them of that. It robs them, and it sucks out their creativity. It turns them into robots that are being asked to do what they need to do at a certain time. Doesn't address the different type of personality of a child, the type of way that the child might learn. None of those things are addressed. It's really factory based, and the systemic racism, the biases, whether it's in public school, whether it's in Islamic school, all of those are present at all time. So I really do see that as an act of resistance, because it's not easy. You're going against the grain. There's a lot of stigma attached to it, and also a lot of people that don't understand and that view this as a subpart education, because most of people just adhere to this modality of learning, right? So It is an act of resistance, because it's not easy.
That's amazing. And I know, Rachel, you want to come in here, but I just would like to ask whoever is watching this, how many of you have discovered during lockdown that your children were not happy at school? Has anybody had that experience where, you know, you've been doing the whole school thing, right? You've been doing the school run, you've been doing the homework, everything's been as normal. But since lockdown, your children have confided in you and actually admitted that they're not really happy at school, that they'd much rather stay home and be with you. I certainly had that experience myself, subhanAllah, and it was revelatory and it was revolutionary, because I did decide to make some decisions based on that. And just a couple of things that are coming up from the audience is, totally echoing what you're saying, Rahma, about the stereotypes and the unconscious bias and the target-based, grade-based education. And maybe that there is a different way of doing things, that there is a freedom to be explored. And I know that Rachel, we did a live last week and we talked about what it really means to put your child's education in their formative years into the hands of a stranger. So Rachel, take it away, girl.
Assalamu alaikum. I think my whole mere existence is a rebellion. It's not just homeschooling, it's just me in general. I'm more one of those people who, if I want something to happen, rather than looking for someone else to do it, I tend to do it myself. So I'm a mum of 5. So private school was never going to be an option. That was going to be a joke, because I'd have to work a million hours in the middle of everywhere to even think, to even fathom. My eldest is adopted. And our first interaction with home education as parents was through him. When I realized, when I adopted him, he's biologically my nephew, but I adopted him at 8, that he was not happy in school. He was totally unhappy, and he was unhappy to the point where he was coming home and I had just had a new baby, and he was reacting really badly to very small, minute details that would change. So I sat down and I talk a lot with my kids, and I spoke to him, and he said, I don't like it there. And I said, well then, don't go. Just don't go. And he went, is that an option? I said, most definitely it's an option. I'm your mother. It's an option. I will drop anything for you to know what's the best version of you. So with him being at home, home education for the younger ones became a first choice. It wasn't a reaction, it was a choice. I did, to prove a point to people who were naysayers, I did take the one that is now 11 to our local school. They do something during the summer called an introduction day. So I took Aisha, and Aisha is exactly like me. She is rebellious. And we took her in, and they were trying to teach this 4 or 5-year-old who had been reading with her brother for years, her alphabet. I said to her, how did you like it? When I picked her up, and she stood there. And I loved that I had instilled that level of confidence in her. She turned around, she looked at the teacher, and she looked at me, and she said, can I be honest? I went, yes. She went, 4-year-olds are stupid. That is literally what she said. I said, do you know you are a 4-year-old as well? And she went, yes, but I'm a different breed of 4-year-old, mum. We're not talking about the same sort of thing. So that became, okay, no one's going to school. So then what do we do? But it was a bit hypocritical on my part, because I was still teaching high school while my kids were not in school. And teaching in high school, open your eyes to a lot of things, especially when my eldest then decided, the boy then decided to try secondary school. And I was called in for insubordination. So not listening to authority. That was not the case. 5'9" black male at the age of 11 told his maths teacher, who was a 5'0" white woman, that her equation on the board was wrong. He tried on several occasions to tell her the equation was wrong. She didn't want to listen to him. He politely, as we told him, put up your hand and sit there. Her remark to him was, if you don't want to be here to learn, leave. He's on the autistic spectrum. He left. So I was called in. But as we sat with the heads, we were told that he was not listening to instructions and he wasn't doing the work. And he was. He was doing the work. He'd done the work. He was done. But he had told her that the last equation could not equal 0. He was the only black child in his class. I came armed with a deregistration letter, which is what we need to hand in the UK in order to withdraw your child from school. They said to me, we don't believe that this is the place for him. And they were, in a way, expecting me to argue to keep him there. And I said, do you know what? I think we're on the same page here. Here is a deregistration letter. I signed it and dated it, handed over, collected my child, gave them back their blazer, said, hand it off to someone who can't afford one, because they're like £70 each. Give it to charity. I will give you the rest of the uniform, because it's all logoed. We don't need it. He can come home and he can be the black man that he needs to be in his own house. It's about time us as black people stop putting our children under the foot of someone that doesn't need them or doesn't want them. And for me, it's not rebellion, it's self-preservation. If we want our boys and our girls to exist as people, we need to give them that solid foundation to be the people that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said they should be. So for me, I say to my kids, it's not rebellion, it's self-preservation and self-determination. If you can't exist, you can't rebel. If they're going to kill you, you can't rebel because you're not going to be here anymore. So stand firm on your own path and get there.
SubhanAllah, somebody's asking where is the heart button, but somebody has found the hearts now. Thank you so much for that, sis. Really, really, really powerful. But I have a question because I'm sensing, and maybe my panel can like, you know, feedback to me on this, and those of you who are watching, I'm sensing a real shift here because our parents sacrificed for our education, right? And wasn't it always education? Everything is education. If you're from Africa, you know it's education, education, education. Yeah, Pakistanis, Indians, Bengalis, everybody, Somalis maybe as well, they got to that stage where it's like education, everything, wallah. So there's a shift here because I'm hearing that this education that our parents fought so hard for us to have and insisted that we submit to, and I use the word submit on purpose because for many of us, our black and brown parents may not have stood up for us against the school. I don't know whether you guys have noticed that. Back in the day, it was if the school told you that it's this, why didn't you listen? If they told you to do that, why didn't you do it? You know, like, and I don't know whether you guys had that experience as well, but yeah, come in, Rachel, go, go, go.
I'm a millennial and my parents did stand up for me.
Okay, you millennial, okay.
So my parents did a very unique thing. I went to a grammar school and as they realized that the grammar school was not fitting, they made a negotiation and I only went to school for 3 days a week.
Oh, wow.
So I went Monday to Wednesday and then Thursday and Friday and Saturday, they set up a Black historical cooperative in Hackney in London. And that's where I went. And that's where all of my closest friends are. And we are all very similar in that manner. Be it Muslim, be it not, we are all very similar in that. And our children are all very similar in that they don't stand for nonsense. They will call bits of people out on institutional racism, no matter where they are. They will call them out. My daughter, when she was about 7 or 8, called out a police officer at Stratford Station in London, telling him that you've got a group of boys here. Why have you only pulled the black one to the side? That makes no sense, and that's not fair. And she said to me, Mum, tell them you're his mother and take him home. And I did. So I think it's a difference in whether your parents came and then finished their education here, and I'm in the UK, or they came to work here. I'm lucky.
Yes.
My mom came as the child of diplomats who came, and she was schooled here. Mm-hmm. So we knew the system really well.
Yeah.
So I went into that cooperative, and that cooperative also taught maths, English, and science. So quite a lot of us piggybacked off that and did GCSEs 2 years earlier than everybody else.
Okay.
So at 14, I had 10 GCSEs. At 16, I enrolled at Leeds University. So my mum knew the system well enough to navigate those waters for all of us. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So when we then had our own children, we navigated the waters for them because we understood the current of the river.
I hear that. And do you think that just as, you and your mother understood the system because she had been in it and was able to negotiate and ask for what she wanted and insist on getting what she wanted in the system, just as you did, do you think also that parents who have grown here and have actually been schooled here are aware of the dangers of the system as well? And don't just trust blindly that, of course, it's a British education. Because we're colonial countries, what it's like. The British education is the standard, right? Like, that is the gold standard. I'm wondering how many here had pushback from their parents because they're rejecting that British education that was so valuable at one point. What are your thoughts on that?
Sorry, can I?
Yeah, please.
I'm actually not feeling really well today. So this is, but I'm extremely passionate about the subject. And that's because September, I'll be going on 20 years of homeschooling my children.
20 years. MashaAllah, tabarakallah. Wow, that's amazing. 20 years. Wow. Yes, sis.
So I have 5, and none of them have actually been to school. So it's literally from the beginning. My first son went to school in the later part of his high school, which in Canada is grade 11. And he went for a half of a year, so a semester, so that he could play soccer on the school team. And that was it. And the only other time he went to school was when he got into university for engineering. The second one never went to school at all. He actually didn't even...
Sorry. Can I just jump in there? Did you just drop that on us? That, the first time he went to school was when he got into university to study engineering? MashaAllah, that's amazing.
And the second one, actually, he was doing something from about grade 4 called unschooling. That's a whole nother subject, okay? And then the third one, these are all males. These are all our boys. The third one did part-time in school online for his grade 11 year. And then he went back to being homeschooled after that. So, and he's now applying for computer science. The second one got into university for marketing business. He's finishing off that. So it's been a lifestyle for us. One of the main reasons why I decided to homeschool from the very beginning was pretty much what the whole topic is about. It was me resisting the system, and really it came about because just watching my brothers go through the school system, even myself, like in Canada at the time, it was starting where they were supporting more Black women in school, so there was more attention to the Black women in school, but still, or Black girls in school, but still the Black boys were being left behind, and left behind in a way that was not even just the fact that they weren't getting a proper education, but it was very detrimental to their self-esteem and self-worth. So for me, it was really just, I decided, you know what, I'm going to facilitate my children's education. I'm going to facilitate them becoming a whole person. And that means thriving self-esteem and self-worth. And by thriving, I mean continuous. So whatever Allah throws their way, or, life brings to them, that they're going to be able to have the proper self-worth and self-esteem to be able to manage through the crisis. And so, because watching my brothers go through this, my youngest brother went into Islamic school, and there isn't much of a difference. Rahma has mentioned this before. We're both in Canada, so the Islamic school, it was more detrimental in a way because of spiritual racism, and it affects your spirituality. So I, decided not to do that. And I had studied early childhood education, and just in my studies, I could see the systematic discrimination and racism that was embedded in the Canadian school system. Just down to, basic, like the history that is being taught, the, English, the resources, the books that are being read, like it's just everywhere, right? So, I decided, like, I'm gonna try to do this, teach them myself. I had one black son, and so I taught him, and then 2 years later I had another one, and then 3 years later I had another one, and I was like, okay, this is it. This is a tribe, and this tribe is not going into the system, And then I had a daughter, and then now I have a son. So my youngest is 10, my son, and so it's become like a lifestyle for us, and I can see the benefit. Just subhanAllah, it's so amazing to actually interact with. I know they're my children, so it's like, okay, prideful or whatever, but just seeing the difference between them and, say, like another black boy who's been through school, like their cousins and things like that, like it's just, it really is just the way that they carry themselves, and the fact that they really, don't see the limits that were placed on other people. I kind of taught them to look at the world through their own eyes. So you're looking outwards, right? You're looking outwards at the world, and you're seeing what you're going to be able to give to the world, what talents that Allah has given you, and you're gonna, you're gonna help the world. You're gonna, give the world. You're gonna, but not to look at yourself the way that person is looking at you, right? So that eliminates,
okay,
like.
well, hold on a second. Hold up. Rewind and come again. Please drop that one again. Guys, I hope you're taking notes. I hope you are getting those truth bombs and those mic drop moments, mashallah. I want to see them, please. When you put them on Instagram, tell me. Sis, please say that again about seeing the world.
So basically, teaching them to look at the world through their eyes, and, to see what they're going to give to the world, and, the talents that Allah has given them, how they're going to share that with the world, right? And not the way that the world is going to be viewing them. Mm. So with all of the, sorry, I'm like, first day for me to be sick, okay? But I'm trying. So just the way that they're being viewed by other people, and the restrictions that puts on you, the damage it does to your self-esteem, your self-worth, and your confidence, and your ability to function in the world. Like, it's just amazing how that little aspect, or that little thing has really changed the way that my children function. And around them is a lot of, there's a lot of people of color in the Muslim community. And, even in the homeschooling group. So, I was one of the founders of the Toronto Muslim Homeschoolers, very large in Toronto here. And it's predominantly Indo-Pac. And just the way they functioned in that group of people, basically not taking on the people's biases and prejudice and that sort of thing, and being able to, stand in front of people, perform, and, do presentations, because we had science fairs and all those kind of fairs, and just not really be concerned with what other people are thinking of them, right? And so, yeah, it's it's a struggle. It's definitely not an easy thing to do, but I mean, anyone who's even thinking about it, I'm telling you, I'm here to tell you, 100%, it's the best way to go. 100%, inshallah.
You guys got that from the OG herself, mashallah, because I think maybe at 20 years she's been in this game, maybe longer than anybody else. Correct me if I'm wrong. But Sis, you mentioned that homeschooling is a lifestyle, and I'd like some of our other panelists to be in homeschooling to speak a little bit to that, please. Just feel free to unmute and jump in.
Can I just jump in real quick before we move on? Because something that Bilqis said really spoke to me. When she talked about children being focused on what the gifts that they give to the world. I think a lot of us notice, well, I've lived it myself, is that after I graduated from university, I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. This sense of finding yourself, this sense of, going and traveling the world, discover your gift. Like you guys all seen on the social media and on the internet, find yourself, go backpacking after school. It's because in the school system, they are not there to discover who you are and what your gifts are. It is really just being a machine that absorbs this information, and then you go on to the world to use whatever information that you got or whatever path that you think that is going to be, that's the easiest for you. Like for me, for myself, if I had been homeschooled, I know now today that creative writing and writing is what I was passionate about. My parents didn't understand that. Creative writing, like immigrant parents, how do you explain that? It was a no-go, right? So it was all about get a stable job, a prestigious job, and that I can explain to your family, that I can explain to guests when they come home. But it just struck me like that is really what's going on. It's children are graduating from school and have absolutely no idea who they are, what God has given them to give back to the world. How can you nourish and sustain the gifts that God has created you with for you to flourish and make an impact into the world? We are not teaching that. The system is not about understanding that. It is not about nourishing any sort of gift or anything. It's about making you conform to that. And we also talk about adulting. What are your kids learning about financial independence? What are they learning about living independently? We are just, I had to grow up, like get married, and I had to figure all of these things out that no one has taught me. Yet I am here, I've graduated, and I've done all of these things. So unless you have amazing parents that are, like I said, supplementing your education with real life learning and supplementing your education with other things that make your personality and, reinforces your identity, absolutely, you have no idea what's going on. You are a shepherd, like you are basically a flock, and you're just following up on this train of this factory. And we are graduating kids that might have graduated from top university. They graduate and they have absolutely no idea who they are, what they want to be, and they have nervous breakdowns, and they have all of these things. So that just spoke to me. I was just like, oh my God, that is the piece that I was missing, that I really understood later in life. And I wish that, it's not too late. Alhamdulillah, my kids are young, and, I'm sure that I'm on the right path. But, that's the mentality. That's the mind shift that we need to make.
Totally. And I've got, people people saying this school does not prepare you for real life at all. And one sister whose son is 2.5 years old, and she's being asked about daycare already. So she's really feeling very inspired to homeschool now. Yes, sis, go ahead, Rachel.
I've got a lot of friends who are my age, who they didn't come through the same system that I did, which was a very bizarre system in itself. They came through the regular school system. And when they say this thing of trying to find themselves, I find it hilarious. And my question back to them is, what have you been doing for the last 30 years?
What have you been doing? Yes.
What have you really been doing for the last 30 odd years? But for me, I understand where Bilqis is saying home ed is a lifestyle. It really is, because it's all encompassing. My two older ones can meal plan, shop, meal prep, and have my fridge stocked while I do some work. And I am so proud of them being the people who they are that I don't need to think about how are they going to be when they leave home. My daughter's already told me she's not standing for no man who's going to tell her she can't do X, Y, and Z. She's not going to do this. She's not going to do that. She's not going to do this. She's not going to do that. But as I sit on this Zoom now, my 11-year-old is running the ship out there. She's got her 2 younger brothers showered, dressed, all sorts going on. And people say to her, like, don't you think that's a lot of responsibility? She goes, but then when I have kids of my own, it's going to be a piece of cake. Like, why do I need to think about it now? That I'm young. Let me get on with what my mom's trying to instill in me. And then when it comes to that point in my life, I don't have to think about it. It's second knowledge. And I don't, yes, you may have a charger, Amara. You don't even have to, in a way, it's going to be innate. And that innate ability for her is what I want. I don't want her to struggle. I don't want her to be like a lot of mums who have their first baby and they look at this fragile thing and go, what am I meant to do? She can bathe a baby. Her brother can bathe a baby. They know how to change nappies. They know what they're doing.
Yeah.
They know what they want from life. She's running her own business. He's running his own business. It's not, I'm going to stop my life in order to study, because they watched me go through university at the same time while parenting them. So I went through uni. She's my master's baby. I have a PGCE baby. I have a PhD baby.
We love it, mashallah.
It's like, it's one of those things where people think life needs to be compartmentalized.
Yes.
And it doesn't. It doesn't.
Yeah.
Why can you not do a master's in a small group while bouncing that baby on your knee? Lecturers don't care. As long as you're getting your work done, they don't care. So why does it need to be, you have to finish school, go to university, then find a husband, then go to work, then have children when it's the right time? What's the right time? Just get on with life.
I love that. And I think Imani wants to jump in here. And I think Imani has been taking some serious notes because your little one is still small, isn't he, mashallah? Is this conversation giving you life right now? Are you like, yes?
I'm loving Sister Rachel, my goodness. Oh my goodness, because my first job working overseas in Cairo was teaching. I taught 10th and 11th grade English literature. And one of the things and one of the tools that I wanted to do was get to know my students. And so we would sit on the desk and we would do like these unconventional things. And my administrator, Miss Imani, you cannot do this. You cannot do this kind of teaching. This is not okay. You're not giving them enough tests. And I'm like, they don't need tests. I need to know who they are as people. I need to know what it is. I had students who had one parent because another parent had died. I had students who had dealt with a sibling who had died that was not even like well into their 20s. I had students who had, behavioral issues that had deeper issues there. And obviously, international schools don't always come equipped with a counselor or a therapist or any of those things. And so as a teacher, you end up being these things. And I remember my father telling me, he said, if ever you have a kid that acts up, don't yell at them and don't send them out of the classroom. There's something deeper there. So when I became an instructor, that's what I look for with my students. My problem kids became come over here and sit with me. You're going to be my favorite for the day. Pass out these papers with me. Do this. And so my administration was like, but test. And I'm like, number one, not all kids are test takers. Number two, we cannot continuously group all of these kids that come from all different backgrounds, all different circumstances, all different type of learning environments into one learning environment and expect them all to thrive. And then when they don't, we have to fail them and they just get left behind as opposed to having someone that can really take the time with them. So I think it's problematic, one, in the sense that you put these kids and you group them all in one thing. My son was by recognizing his numbers and his alphabet by sight and say before he turned 2 years old. So for me, I'm like, I'm not going to put him in a school where, just like, you know, Rachel's daughter or the other, you know, sister's daughter, she's like, but these kids are stupid. Like I brought him to a center when we were living in China, and they pretty much were telling me, oh, your son can help us like teach the other kids. And I'm like, why would I pay you for my son who's 2.5 to come and teach these other toddlers? It doesn't make any sense to me. So yeah, when it comes to, for me, when it comes to that, my thing is also whether you have a slower learner or a faster learner, that also has a huge impact into their learning environment. And for me, I want to nurture my son in where he is to not feel like he's constantly competing with other children.
That makes a huge difference. And I can imagine his self-esteem and his sense of who he is must just be off the charts, because he's just a boy in the world, right? And you guys, you have a traveling lifestyle, don't you? I think that's right. Sis, Mariam, do you have a traveling lifestyle, don't you, Imani? I think your internet's breaking up. I want to pull Sister Mariam in here just to speak on this lifestyle thing, because I think for a lot of people, the thing about homeschooling is that looks so scary is, you know, what does that look like? What does that mean? You know, does that mean that I'm going to be teaching all day long? Does that mean that I won't be able to have a life of my own? Can I still work if I want to homeschool? Everybody has been forced to homeschool, quote unquote, now. What do you think people's lockdown experience will have taught them? To think that homeschooling is great, or to think, no, you just open those schools, I'm a kid, put those kids right back in. What are your thoughts?
Okay, I think through speaking to like a lot of mothers and parents I've been speaking to at the moment,
because
I think a lot of them
coach parents, don't you? Are
you
like a homeschooler?
Yeah, so I'm a homeschool and parent coach, and through speaking to them, I've realized that people have really got to know their children as a person. And it's not to say they didn't know who they were before, but really getting to know your child for who they are, what their likes are, what their interests are, what they actually like doing. And I think there's this daunting sort of misconception that if you're homeschooling, it has to be like, for example, like school, you know, 9 till 3. And completely like Sister Rachel touched on, that homeschooling is it is absolutely a lifestyle. So for myself, after I had the two little ones, I had the toddler and the newborn, and I went back to university. I said, you know what, I'm going to do a postgraduate in education. So my children grew up seeing mummy, you know, learning and, you know, studying and doing exams. So for them, it's like, for me, the most important thing is instilling that love of learning in them. And children naturally have that. And unfortunately, I really do believe that the school system kind of sucks that out of them. You know, the curiosity, the natural interest that they have. And I think it's really important to first and foremost see our children as our child first before we ever view them as a pupil. They're not our pupils, they're our children first and foremost. And if we can create that positive learning environment within our homes, they will absolutely thrive and flourish. I can honestly hand on heart say that. If we're providing them with that sort of positive learning environment, I'm quite big on pushing the narrative of the whole child, so not just looking at the academic side, but also looking at their sort of the emotional well-being, their mental health, because especially from a young age, those two things are very, very well connected. And I always say that if we start thinking about, you know, when we went through the education system when we were at school, perhaps there was a particular teacher that we really liked, and, you know, we really enjoyed their company, and maybe we fell in love with that subject because of that reason. So see your role as a facilitator of your child's learning. So not so much as the teaching role, but just more as a facilitator.
Yeah, and I just would love to just pick your brain on this as well, because a really good question has come in on, you know, do you think it's necessary for the parents to be educated to a certain level to be able to keep up with homeschooling, especially when you get to high school, GCSE, A-level? What are your thoughts on that?
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. There are so many amazing resources online. You can get tutors. You do not need to be educated to a certain level, not at all. And to be honest, when you become a teacher and you go through the whole, you know, the PGCE, you are not taught anything. You're hardly taught anything, you know. So I mean, I don't even think many teachers are qualified to teach, you know, some of the subjects. So for example, you may train in English, but somehow you'll find yourself in a history lesson, for example. Yeah, so to answer your question, the answer is absolutely not. Alhamdulillah, we are so blessed to have so many resources and things online schooling, you know, tutors to have on hand. And do you know what, honestly, there is no better person equipped to educate your child than yourself. You've been doing it since you gave birth. You know, everything that your child knows, it's because of you. And Allah has given you the natural ability, the natural talents. We just need to tap into them and take back our role as, you know, as mothers, take back our role, take back our children's childhood, and take ownership of it. Allah has given us these natural abilities.
Yeah, this is echoing a theme actually about taking back control, which was something that came up a lot in our last session. I just want to give the mic to Rahma. Go ahead, sis.
Great. Yeah, I think someone had mentioned here a question about single mothers.
Yes, that's a big one.
And maybe someone that's a little bit more knowledgeable on that can speak to it. But what I wanted to say is that in terms of the lifestyle, what I've noticed recently is that my job has now shifted to working at home, which has now created this, you know, concept of how I even want to change my life and how I want to now have the possibility and create an opportunity that I can continue to do that. I really sincerely believe that this year, all of the things that have been happening is forcing us to reimagine our lives and to ask ourselves really hard questions and to kind of redesign the kind of lives that we want to live. And so yeah, it's created this opportunity for me to imagine a different lifestyle. Is that beforehand, when we were doing the whole school run and I was running to work and all of that, I couldn't imagine a different lifestyle. I couldn't imagine a lifestyle where I was homeschooling the kids, how that would affect them. I couldn't imagine working at home and how that would impact it. But now it has really forced me to reconsider some of the choices that I have been making and really created an opportunity for us to have conversations where my daughter's telling me, you know what, I'm not even happy at the school, making me question some of the decisions that I'm doing, working outside the home and seeing how I can have the ability to change that. Certain desires that I've always had to travel and do some of the things that Imani is doing, where, you know, world schooling, as they call it, where you travel the world and you school there, and things that I could never have imagined are now a possibility because I am taking that journey and, you know, doing our own education. So alhamdulillah, I'm just grateful for some of the things that have happened. It's been, you know, very scary and things like that. But if you really take the time to think about this time and what it has taught you, I'm hoping that other people are also noticing that we are able to shift our life into different directions.
Definitely. It's amazing to see how, subhanallah, you know, from adversity, such amazingness can come. And I think that is that freedom to reimagine and to recreate ourselves, our children's, you know, systems, our routines, our education. Go ahead, sis Rachel.
I'm sorry. Bilqis was before me.
Oh, Bilqis, I'm so sorry.
So no.
Bilqis, you know, we always have to make excuses for you because you're Canadian, right? No, and Tina told me that Canadians don't interrupt.
I have two problems.
Yes.
I'm Canadian and I'm not feeling well, so that's doubly I'm not jumping in. Okay.
So. Okay, the mic is yours.
Okay. I can answer the question about level of education. So I know it's a running joke with me. I didn't want to learn math or relearn math after grade 6, 7 level, so I did not do that. Okay, with my first one I tried, and it was I just had a hard time with math myself growing up. So I was like, I'm not going to relearn this. No. So all my children, you know, after they get to probably grade 6, grade 7 level, they have tutors for math, and it hasn't been an issue at all because, you know, the ones that needed math continued, and the ones that didn't need math went to a level, and that was all good, right? And then also to the question about being a single mother, I've been a single mother for the past 5.5 years. And it hasn't, I mean, it's kind of like shifted our lifestyle a little bit, but, you know, being the person who was the one who was the main facilitator of the homeschooling or my children's lives, it didn't really hinder anything, and it didn't really disrupt much. And then as well too, 6 years ago, I had really started focusing heavily on my business. And alhamdulillah, it's really grown over the years. So also running a business, like I guess I could say like it's a full-time business and homeschooling my children at the same time. That's also very possible.
Do you think that's because your children are older, or that you have older ones to help with the younger ones? Could that be a part of the dynamic?
I think in the case of having to go somewhere and not having to bring my children along with me, that did help. That definitely did help. But in terms of anything else, I mean, because it's your lifestyle, kids, they learn how to move with you, right? If you have to do something, they're coming with you. Even when they were babies, you know, they knew how to just flow with whatever is happening, right? So I think that because you are so used to routine with the school system and everything needing to be so scheduled, that it's hard for you to understand that children can be a part of your life 24/7, you know, and unless
it's okay, and it's actually pretty cool, and it's not that we have to run away from our children, which I'm sorry guys, can I just jump in here and say, I think our culture, you know, when people, maybe not so much Muslims, but the wider culture that we live in, when people had to have their kids at home, they were losing their minds. Like, they could not even fathom how that could be doable, how that could be in any way enjoyable. And I wonder what has happened in our society, or maybe even within us, I don't know, where we do see spending time with our children and having any kind of extended interaction with them as something burdensome, you know, and something that's to be avoided at all costs. It's like you're kind of outsourcing the parenting. So everybody wants to have children, but not everybody wants to have children in that way. I don't know whether anybody else noticed that, but I definitely.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Now, a lot of people, you know, messaging me saying, how did you do it? You know, the first, like, maybe couple of weeks. Like, I don't understand how you've done this for so long. They're driving me crazy, you know? But then quite a good number of them message me, like, after 2-3 weeks of it and say, no, I can see, because I've gotten so much closer to my kids. Like, I started having a feeling of love for them in a different way, right? And, you know, our communication is so much better. You know, I don't know how I'm going to do it when I have to send them back, right? Because they know that this is their lifestyle. They have to send them back. They're working outside. You know what I mean? They don't see in their mind that they actually can change their lifestyle for their children. So they're like, how am I going to send them back? I'm going to, you know, it's going to hurt me so much when I do that. And I give them the option. Why don't you sit down and start thinking and planning about ways that you can not send them back? Like, it's a possibility, you know, like, outside the box, you know?
Yeah, and just to close off this part of the conversation, I'd like to know from the panelists, you know, do you think that we are going to see more parents opting to keep their kids out of school now that they've had this experience? And how do you feel about that? Rachel, yes, go.
Okay, so I genuinely like my kids.
Which is good. Which is good.
They're like really nice. They're crazy, but they are nice people. I can have a genuine conversation with my daughter, a genuine conversation with my son. My 4-year-old, he's not right. He's just not right in the head. But he's a lovely kid. I can get him to do the laundry. Like, if the kids are giving you stress, find them something to do. They will be glad to help you do something because they always want to be with you. And I think that's that innate ability in children to want to be with their parents. But for me,
I think that our culture has kind of, for a long time, it seems that the wider culture, not so much Muslims, I don't think Muslims struggle from this, suffer from this as much, but now we're going to find that this next generation of Muslims are going to be under pressure from society a lot more than maybe we were, in the sense that there's like a move to get kids into a system, get them into daycare, get them into school, you know, get them into activities and all of that kind of thing.
There is a push for that sort of stuff. But for me personally, I think for those people that are saying, okay, I need to work outside the home, I'm a single parent, learn the law of the country you are in. And I say that with sort of a set of rules in my head. During the week, my 18-year-old is not here. He's doing his last year of university, lovely kid, excellent young man. But I still have 5 children because a good friend of mine doesn't want her daughter in the system. She is a single parent, and she said to me, would you mind? And I said, no. Homeschooling, find another homeschool mum who you can interchange with. You work 3 days, she works 3 days, and then you swap. The reason why a lot of people are afraid of that is they listen to the 2-hour rule that the government has on babysitting and swapping babysitting without having to pay for it. Then think again. Get yourself a CRB, get yourself a child minding license, and swap it that way. Then that rule no longer applies. Or if your child is registered as being home educated, it doesn't say that that child has to be home educated by you. That child just has to be receiving an adequate education. If they are receiving an adequate education via someone else who is also educating their children, that 2-hour rule no longer applies. Because it's no longer classed as babysitting, it's classed as independent education.
It sounds like what we might need to have, sorry, Dr. Rachel, is a session where people who are interested in the bare, you know, like literally the nitty gritty of it, the legalities of it, the logistics, the practical side, to be able to sit with you. Well, firstly, guys, you should follow all these amazing ladies on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter. If you go to my Instagram, you will see all they are all linked there, but follow them. You know, get into their DMs, have a conversation, but certainly I would love to facilitate an opportunity for people who do want specific questions answered to be able to sit and literally pick you ladies' brains, because, you know, I know that there's so many questions out there, mashallah. So just to tie us up for this section, anyone else have anything that you want to share on whether you think that more people will homeschool and whether you think that's a good thing, and maybe just final words of encouragement for the ladies who are on here, because I can see that some people are on here because they homeschool already, or because they're interested, or because they're kind of curious. So final words for the ladies who are listening to this, and the gentlemen.
Yeah. What we have is, I'm a trustee for the Center for Personalized Education, and we have had several thousand requests on our Facebook groups, the Instagram handles, everything, to say, how do we go about home educating our children? And the majority of that, surprisingly, are Africans in diaspora.
Not surprising.
But the impact that a lot of us, I'm the only Black trustee, but all of the other trustees are saying, if you've got that marginalized element of society who are going to start home educating in large numbers, you're going to see a change in legislation very soon. Very, very soon. Because the way the UK legislation works at the moment is it's a parent's choice how they choose to home educate their children.
Yeah.
You can homeschool, world school, you can unschool, you can climb trees all day, and you can have as structured as you want or not as structured as you want. But we are seeing further and further that it's going to have to move to something slightly different, because the freedom, one moment, my 4-year-old's doing craziness. I told you he's crazy. But it seems that they're going to have to legislate a lot more if they want to keep control. That's going to be necessary. And if that happens, I'm disappearing.
Okay, off the grid for you, Dr. Rachel. Okay.
At the moment, if your child has never been into school, in the UK, they fall into a category of being unknown. So you don't have to have visits from the LEA, you don't have to do lots of other things, because your children are not even known about. if they wanted to locate your child, they have to use doctor's records to locate your child. We don't have to ask permission here. So if they need to go down that route, that's a freedom of information that they need to go through in order to get your details. And they don't want to spend the money to do that. That's why they are looking and may actually look at compulsory registration.
Okay, well, we shall have to address that as and when that happens. But Imani, any parting words as we close off this section?
Yeah, I think certainly, especially in the United States, a lot of people are going to opt for it because a lot of companies now where people would have to work outside of the home are allowing them to work in the home because they're seeing, because of COVID and the whole pandemic, that, you know, that people working remotely actually works, that it's okay, that, you know, they don't have to be in the office. They actually just had I forget what publication it was, but there was an article about having a 4-day work week versus a 5-day work week. And so those are things that they're really considering and really talking about. And I think the more that people have had to be at home with their children and, you know, as it's been expressed, learning what it is that their children are actually going through at school and, you know, having this time to say, you know what, is it really worth that? I think it's going to be something that, you know, it can't be denied. I remember just in my own experience, my son, I guess he was about 1.5. And I remember somebody telling me that a cousin of his, which was like only a week older, that she was saying her ABCs. And I'm like, okay, but he's speaking Chinese. So we're comparing apples and oranges here. Like, you know, for me, I think, you know, anyone that's here that is considered homeschooling, understand that your kid can go at their own pace. You don't have to go at the pace of a curriculum. You don't have to go at a set, you know, time or, oh gosh, they have to get this at this stage. Each kid is going to have a different stage and when they get things, and you just champion them in what it is that they do know and continue to nurture and honor what it is that they're learning. I think that's the most important thing. And the best part about having your babies at home with you is that they don't feel like the dumb kid, or they don't feel like they're not getting something because somebody else is. They're allowed to do things in their own time. And I think the more that parents are seeing this while they're at home, while they're taking the time to say, you know what, okay, this is kind of complicated. Now I can understand why, like, I'm not the math parent either. So I'm very similar in probably, you know, like Bilqis said, once that 5th grade, 6th grade math, and they got some new school math that I've been seeing, I'm like, I don't even know what this is. You know, tutors, foreign language tutors, you know, I don't have to be, you know, that it's okay if you're the parent that you don't get it and you don't understand it. Find someone who does. Just like Rachel said, if it's partnering with another parent who may be that science whiz and understands biology, not me, you know, hey, can we swap lessons? I'll do some English and writing, and you can do some science some days, and maybe do it like that. But I certainly think that it'll be an influx of more parents wanting to take the task on of homeschooling.
Amazing. Yes, Mariam, what about you? What are your thoughts? Thank you, sis.
I was going to say that I echo Sister Imani's thoughts on, I think, do you know what, after speaking to parents, I think it's really interesting because now a lot of parents are starting to see the flaws in the education system where perhaps they didn't, and realizing that us as parents, because if we have been through the education system, we have a lot to unlearn. So essentially we need to de-school ourselves. Yes. So that maybe there's a certain view of education that we see, okay, does homeschooling need to be at the desk? You know, do you need to have table and chairs? You know, we're in the garden, we're on the stairs, we're on the floor, on the sofa, wherever, you know, learning is essentially, it's a fact of life. You cannot separate learning and living. They just come hand in hand together. So I think definitely there will be an influx of lots of homeschooling parents, especially from the messages that I've been getting, the people that I've been speaking to, and just knowing that you as a mother, you know, you have the power to change the next generation, and just owning that power and knowing that you have the power to break that cycle of, you know, oh my gosh, I hate learning, or I don't like maths, or I don't like this. You have the power to change that, and just owning that.
Wonderful, fantastic. And the OG Bilqis, let me go to Rahma first, and I would like to end. Rahma, if you're available, if you're able to come on, if you have some final words, otherwise I'm going to go to Sister Bilqis. Yes, ma'am. Advice for parents who are considering it, maybe in particular as a result of, you know, the lockdown and the quarantine.
Yes, just echoing what the sisters are saying. Definitely, I feel like there will be an influx of people who have decided to homeschool, at least for the primary years. I think that if somebody were thinking of, okay, I can't really do it for, for the long haul, I feel the primary years are will show so much benefit to your children, in the long run, right? Just being able to stay at home and close to you, and being able to be nurtured in that way, in an individual way, based on personality and way of learning, and just being with their siblings and not having to rush and being forced to do things that they're not interested in, and sitting for long hours, and wasting a whole lot of time, and their talents being squashed, and there's so many things. I'm sure a lot of people are realizing that and recognizing, and seeing so many new things in their children right now that they weren't able to see, and they didn't have the time to see it. And they're if they do put their children back in, they'll probably again see the difference. Like, okay, last week my child was able to had time to do this, and now they can't, and maybe that will be something that will help them decide to start homeschooling. Here in Canada, Ontario, where I live, and probably majority of Canada, it's totally up to the parents to what how they educate their kids. There isn't a lot of restrictions, and like Rachel was mentioning, off the grid. My children were off the grid until they went to university, so that was interesting. Yeah, I feel like it's something that people are definitely gonna try to do, and I'm just so happy for children who will be able to experience this.
Nice, and mashallah, it's amazing. And Rahma, you are just you're just starting to think about it, just embarking on this. Final words, how excited are you on a scale of 1 to 10?
I'm very excited, because even though I'm just contemplating now, and I don't have much experience other than at the time of the pandemic, it was in my heart for a long time. And I remember going to many meetings of these homeschoolers organizations that are near my house, and what I noticed for me is that the children that are in those gatherings are different than other children. Very, very different. The way that they behave, the way that they express themselves, the way that they hold themselves, even the way they walk into a room, the way that they're fully present. For me, that's one of the things that I notice. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of diversity in the groups that I have seen here locally. It's a lot of white people. There isn't that much, but we do have a few Muslim families that do it. And my hope is for us to kind of come together. And like Bilqis has an organization that I've heard about in Toronto. You guys are lucky to have that, and hopefully, inshallah, that we can do a collective like that, because that would be amazing for us to unite and to have that experience. So I'm very excited in the changes that I'm seeing for my children in the time that they've just been home, and just seeing the organic, the organic learning that I'm noticing. It's something that I never really fully experienced. I always thought that some of the things that they've learned was coming from the fact of being schooled at school. And now I'm seeing them looking into things by themselves and learning things, and that spark of, just creativity, and that spark of just their wanting to learn. So witnessing that for me is a tremendous encouragement to go forward. I'm trying to speak about this as much as possible. So just to kind of empower people, to let them know that, God has given us opportunity to even witness this opportunity, to experience it. And it is high time that some of us take on this journey to kind of redefine our lives, redefine and restructure the way that we want to live, because this feels right. Honestly, the high pressure of waking up a certain time, rushing, that moment of rushing and just rushing, getting somewhere, if that only thing that we can change, and like just that simple fact that I'm not rushing anywhere, and in the mornings rushing to go and to come back, that has alleviated a lot of stress and given me so much contentment in my life that I'm like, I have to preserve this feeling. And just watching my children flourish, I'm very excited. Inshallah, I pray that more people are able to do this and that we can unite and, you know, create the next generation of children that are going to be change makers, because they are more empowered in themselves and they're not going to have to, you know, struggle to discover themselves and struggle to prove themselves to anyone. And they're going to be confident in who they are because that's how we've raised them to be.
Amazing, mashallah. Fantastic. Thank you so much. Mariam, did I give you a chance to say final words? Yes, did I? Wonderful. So I just want to take an opportunity now to thank everyone for being here with us for yet another virtual salon. We are going to go to the members only, or the live session, where we get to do some Q&A and we get to have a bit more of a chat and get some, you know, get some conversation going. But just thank you so much for being with us. I pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala facilitates everything for you and allows you to do the very best for yourself and for your family. Until the next time, Assalamu alaikum. If you enjoyed this conversation and you would like to become part of the Virtual Salon family, consider becoming a patron. From just £5 a month, you can get access to our chat community, to be invited to our live sessions, and get exclusive content that we only create for our patrons. Be part of the movement. Sign up on Patreon today.